When you think of exclusive cars, you might think of Ferrari or Porsche, or even Ford with their GT model. What many don't know though is that Mazda had their very own set of exclusive cars. These cars were just as, or if not far more exclusive than those. This is the story of M2 Incorporated. In this video, we'll cover M2, their headquarters, their models, and lastly, how their spirit continues on. So what is M2? In the late 80s and early 90s, Mazda was thinking of creative new ways to interact with their clients. But instead of taking the route that most companies do, like focus groups,
this little number.
Jordan.
Hey Jordan, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So
they decided to build an entire new company. This sort of company was referred to as an antenna studio. In 1991, M2 Incorporated was created, and in charge was Masakatsu Kato, who was known for getting the Miata onto the market. So this company worked closer to clients than no other company had before. They even had their own public relations magazine called M2 Voice. Mazda was really banking on this company to serve as a way for them to look forward into the future. So one of the main things that really stands out about this is their headquarters. It's honestly like the pinnacle of vaporwave design, and it was built specifically for Mazda. It was designed by the same man who designed the 2020 Tokyo Olympics Stadium. His name is Kengo Kuma, and he was heavily inspired by the Italian artist and architect Piranesi. Italian and Greek designs, some subtly and some more obviously. The building really represented postmodern design. One of the big features that stands out on the M2 building is the huge column that's in the middle. This column housed the glass elevator shaft that was nicknamed the missile silo. Riding this elevator shaft, people would explore multiple stories and gaze upon the concepts that were inside. The first floor included a dealership. The second story had a cafe, an auditorium, and a bookshop. The third and fourth floors were reserved for development. The windows were lined with heavy highway barriers that insulated the interior from any noise, which came in handy because now the building is a funeral home. So let's look at some of the models that were brainstormed inside of this building. M2 had a specific way of labeling their products. 1001 to 2999 were cars. 2,999 to 5,999 were products that were related to cars, and 9,000 and up was reserved for communications. The only way to obtain M2 cars was through a lottery. People had to show up specifically to the building to sign up for a chance to own one of these. The darker colored cars shared the same paint as the Mazda Sentia, and the white cars shared the same paint as their Titan commercial series trucks. So let's start with the M2 1001, the Clubman or the Cafe Racer. There were 300 units of this car made, and it featured a brand new air dam with fog lights, vintage mirrors, roll bar, vintage gauge cluster, gas cap, 15x6 Panasport wheels, fixed bucket seats, Momo steering wheel, upgraded suspension, HKS exhaust, lightweight flywheel, and it was a tuned 1.6 making 130 horsepower, sending all of the power to the rear limited slip differential. Moving on to the M2 1002, otherwise known as like the vintage concept. Again, 300 units were planned, but only 100 made. The main thing about this one was the interior. It had wooden trim and ivory leather, and it had a brand new front bumper as well. After that, moving on to M2 1005 or M2 1023. The car was based on the Familia GTR. The 1005 model had really aggressive fenders and wing, and it was designed to be used in competition with the WRC Rally. under the Group A category. The 1023 was more of a tame version. It's like when you have a concept car that's extreme and then you have the actual model that comes out. Unfortunately, none of these were ever really produced. I think a few concepts were made and that's about it. M2 1006, the Cobraster. There was only 2 of these made, but they were heavily inspired by the Shelby Cobra. They featured a 929 quad cam, 2.5 liter V6, an RX-7 rear subframe and suspension, wide fenders, and a different front bumper. These were probably by far the fastest cars to come out of M2, unless maybe the 1005 could compete with it. M2 didn't only build sports cars. They also had an SUV concept called the 1009. It was designed to be sporty, with a rear hatch that opens to the side, and it was designed specifically to be easy for women and children to get into. It was their all-around car, a sports utility vehicle. Honestly, it looked a little weird, but it would have definitely gone for big money these days, had they have made it. The next concept is the 1010, or otherwise known as the Fuser. It combines sports and utility, just like their SUV, except that it was like the El Camino of M2. It featured a Mazda Estina front end and a Familia sedan rear. This is one of the weirdest cars to come out of M2. They had other weird concepts, but this is definitely one of the top. Next we have the M2 1015. This is a concept based on the AutoZam. The main feature is that the fog lights are molded into the hood, and the bumper and wing had a revised design. They also featured 2 other concepts based on this one. The 1015A, which was a WRC rally inspired one, and it featured an integrated wing, hood vent, square lights with better visibility that included spotlights, and a rear bumper that had better heat dissipation.
And then they created the 1015B, which featured windows that could be zipped up and down.
Probably one of the most popular concepts to come out was the 1028 competition. It featured 140 horsepower with a more aggressive cam and a 10.61 compression ratio, and it also had an aluminum roll cage. This would have been definitely the pinnacle M2 to own if you're a racing enthusiast. M2 was defunct in 1995.
But their spirit continues. Between people who still own the cars and people who still seek the parts, their legacy lives on.
Here are a few roadsters that are inspired by him.
And if you enjoyed the video, then remember to hit the like and subscribe.